Hello, friend. I'm John Carter. Welcome today to the Carter Report. Our topic today is the little pastor. I'm going to tell you the story, an amazing story, of a man from El Salvador, Pastor Pacheco. And we have a great pastor with us also today, and that is the senior pastor of the Spanish American Adventist Church in Los Angeles. And we want to welcome today also Pastor Acosta. This is going to be a great program. Welcome to the Carter Report. Hi, I'm John Carter. My wife Beverly and I were watching television the other night, watching the news, American news. They told us that the church in North America is actually shrinking. They said that atheism is the fastest growing religious movement today in North America. And people are saying, what on earth can we do to save the church? Well, of course, Christ died for the church. He saved the church. But what they mean is, how can we keep the church as a vibrant force in the world today, in Australia, in America, and in Europe, and in the rest of the world? Let me tell you a little story. John Wesley was one of the greatest preachers that the English-speaking world has ever heard. John Wesley came upon the scene of the church in England a few hundred years ago when the church was dying. Like the church today, it was a shrinking church. But the people in the church were in a state of denial. They refused to accept the reality that the church was dying. John Wesley did something that other people said couldn't be done. He revived the church through public evangelism. Did you hear that? He started to preach Christ, he preached the Bible, and he preached out of doors and indoors. And the church was saved. Not only did he save a lot of souls, the souls of sinners, he saved the souls of the saints. Please join me, my friend, in evangelism. It's what Jesus did. Write to me, John Carter, Post Office Box 1900, Thousand Oaks, California. In Australia, write to me at the address on the screen at Terrigal in New South Wales. Join me, my friend, in preaching Christ. Join me in public evangelism around the world. Thank you. In Jesus' name. Welcome today to the Carter Report. We're talking today to a man whom I consider is a real Christian hero, and he comes from El Salvador. Pastor Pacheco. Welcome today, Pastor Pacheco.
Gracias.
And also we have with us a very distinguished pastor, Pastor Acosta, who is the senior pastor of the Spanish American Adventist Church in Los Angeles.
Thank you.
And we're glad to have you both with us today. Now, before we start the story, because we're going to tell the story of the little pastor, I just want to give a little preamble here. El Salvador, I want the audience to know a little bit about El Salvador, is a Roman Catholic country in Central America. It has a population of just over 6 million. It is a land, my friend, that has seen tremendous bloodshed between the militia and gangs. Some 75,000 people murdered on the streets of the cities of El Salvador, and Pastor Pacheco was right in the midst of it. That's the story he's going to tell today. It is a land that has seen also terrible devastation from hurricanes and earthquakes and droughts. I've never heard anything quite like it outside of the Bible. 70,000 gang members live in El Salvador, with 9,000 gang members in prison. My friends, the Carter Report conducted meetings in El Salvador just a few months ago. We had the privilege of hiring the National Football Stadium, the biggest football stadium in Central America. We had tremendous success because we had the tremendous blessing of God. We saw just on 5,000 people baptized in one day. The person who put it together was the hero of our program today, and that's Pastor Pacheco. And we welcome him today, and we welcome Pastor Acosta to the Carter Report. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here.
So glad to have you here, Pastor.
Thank you.
You've come a long way today, and we're glad that you're with us. The first question goes to you, Pastor Pacheco.
Primera pregunta, pastor, para ti.
We know that El Salvador has seen a lot of bloodshed.
Sabemos que El Salvador ha visto mucho derramamiento de sangre.
What was it like growing up as a boy in El Salvador?
¿Cómo era crecer como niño allá en El Salvador?
Bueno, era bastante difícil, pastor.
It was quite difficult, pastor.
Sin embargo, siempre tuvimos la dirección y la presencia de nuestro Dios.
But in the middle of it all, we always had God's protection.
En medio de esas crisis de la guerra, del derramamiento de sangre,
And in the middle of all these crises and that bloodshed,
uno como joven tenía que decidir ser fiel al Señor o no ser fiel a Él.
one as a young person had to decide whether to be faithful to him or not.
Un jovencito de 14 años,
A young man of 14 years of age,
probando su fe,
his faith being tested,
de servir al Señor.
whether to serve the Lord.
Y Dios nos ayudó para servirle a Él.
I've seen a movie on El Salvador.
Yo he visto algunas películas de El Salvador
It told about both sides.
y nos hablaba de ambos lados.
The militia that was backed by the right-wing government.
Las guerrillas que eran apoyadas por el gobierno.
And then you had the rebels or the gangs.
Y luego tenían los rebeldes, también las pandillas.
And so you really had two armies.
Así que tenían dos fuerzas armadas.
And tens of thousands of people lost their lives.
Y miles de personas perdieron sus vidas.
Did you, as a boy,
Tú, como niño,
growing up in El Salvador,
creciendo allá en San Salvador,
did you actually see violence and bloodshed?
¿viste tú la violencia y el derramamiento de sangre?
Claro que sí, pastor.
Yes.
Nosotros andábamos predicando el Evangelio,
As a young person, we were preaching the gospel.
hacíamos campañas.
You were preaching the gospel as a young person.
¿Estás predicando tú el evangelio como un jovencito?
Claro que sí.
Yes, sir.
How old were you when you were preaching the gospel?
¿Cuántos años tenías cuando andabas predicando?
10 años de edad.
I was preaching at 10 years old.
And you were preaching the Bible.
Y estabas predicando la Biblia.
Claro que sí. Dando estudios bíblicos, visitando las casas.
Giving Bible studies, visiting homes.
Explotaba una bomba por acá.
Bombs were exploded, in our travels.
Habían balaceras.
There were gunfights.
Uno se escondía
We had to hide.
mientras pasaba la balacera.
And then when all that was over with,
Seguía predicando.
we kept on preaching.
We're talking about a boy of 10 years of age.
Estamos hablando de un niño de 10 años de edad.
And this is a boy who was seeing violence.
Y este es un niño que veía la violencia.
75,000 people were murdered
75,000 personas fueron asesinadas
by the government militia
por los militantes
and by the gang members.
y por los pandilleros.
And you saw the blood.
Y tú viste la sangre.
Tell me, how could you ever, as a boy of 10,
¿Cómo tú a los 10 años de
how
edad,
could you preach the Bible?
cómo es que pudiste predicar la palabra de Dios en medio de todo esto?
Bueno, estando en la iglesia,
Being in the church,
fuimos instruidos por nuestros ancianos.
we were instructed by the church elders.
Pero yo nací en un hogar adventista.
I was born in a Seventh-day Adventist home.
Mis padres ya eran miembros de la iglesia.
My parents were already members of the church.
Ellos nos llevaban a dar estudios.
And they would take us with them to give Bible studies.
Me enseñaron a relacionarme con las personas,
And they taught me how to relate to the people,
a cantar, a orar.
to sing, to pray.
Y eso me ayudó a mí como jovencito
And that helped me as a young person
a darle mi vida al Señor.
to give my life and risk it even for the Lord.
Yo me bauticé a los 10 años
I was baptized at 10 years old.
y justamente a esa edad comencé también a predicar.
And right after my baptism, at that age, I started to preach.
Mi anciano o mi pastor
My pastor
Yes.
me daba los sermones.
would give me his sermons,
Te toca predicar en la iglesia.
and he would say, now it's your turn to preach at the church.
Yo predicaba.
And I would preach.
Me iba con algún anciano, algún líder de la iglesia
And I would travel with some elders of the church
a dar estudio bíblico y me enseñaba a dar estudio
to
bíblico.
give Bible studies.
How many people were in the church when you preached?
¿Cuántas personas habían en la iglesia cuando tú predicabas?
Más o menos unas 100 personas, 150.
About 150 people, church
And so they
members.
called you the little pastor.
Y comenzaban de ahí a llamarte el pequeño pastor.
Bueno, en el pastorcito, cuando me llamaron el pastorcito,
When they began to call me the little pastor,
bueno, la iglesia sí, los hermanos me llamaban así.
yes, the members began to call me like that.
A mí mi modelo era mi padre.
My motto was my father.
Él usaba sus corbatas.
He would wear his ties.
Y muchas veces, como yo no tenía corbata,
and many times I did not own a tie,
yo agarraba los calcetines más largos de mi papá
I would grab my dad's long socks
y me los ponía como
You
corbata.
wore a sock.
and I would put it as a tie.
Y entonces, en el barrio, en el cantón donde estaba, en la colonia,
So in the neighborhood I was growing up in,
reunía a los demás niños
I would gather all the children
y yo les decía, yo soy el pastor de ustedes.
and I would tell them, I'm your pastor.
Les predicaba ahí a ellos.
And I would preach to them.
Entonces, me tocaba vender en el mercado, en el pueblecito,
And so in the town square, I used to sell.
vender pan, vender ropa.
I used to sell bread and I used to sell used clothes.
Y las señoras del mercado, los puestos en el mercado,
And the ladies in the town square of the little shops,
yo iba a orar por cada puesto.
I would go and pray for each little shop there.
Las personas que no eran cristianas,
As a little boy.
que no eran adventistas, ¿sí?
And
12
to the
años.
people who were not Adventists, and at the marketplace, I would go and pray for them.
How dangerous was it there in El Salvador at this time?
¿Qué tan peligroso era, pastor, en esos momentos de tu
When
vida?
you were preaching,
Cuando tú andabas predicando.
when you were visiting and praying with people,
Cuando andabas
how dangerous
visitando.
was it?
Sí, bueno, estaba la guerra, el apogeo de la guerra,
The war was right, it was right in the middle of the war.
y estaban los dos ejércitos.
And the two armies were in the one side and the other.
And so the guns were firing.
Así que
La guerrilla y la Fuerza Armada.
se estaban disparando el uno con el otro.
Sí, a veces uno estaba en medio de ellos,
So I was caught up many times in the middle of a gunfight.
de los disparos, y entonces uno estaba en esa
Did you
situación.
see people killed?
¿Viste tú personas que fueron asesinadas,
Oh,
pastor?
sí, claro,
Yes, I did.
claro que sí.
Many people.
Mucha gente?
Mucha.
Many.
Were you afraid in your own heart?
¿Tenías tu miedo en tu
Here's a
propio
little
corazón?
boy, and he's caught up in a bloodbath,
Aquí hay un niño
fighting on both sides,
y está en medio de estas matanzas
and he's out preaching the word.
y está predicando la
Sí.
palabra.
Tenía miedo,
I was scared.
lloraba,
I used to cry.
pero a la vez sabía lo que la Biblia decía,
But I also knew what the word said
de las guerras que se estaban levantando, que se iban a levantar,
of the wars that would happen, the signs of
y
the
que era un
Yes.
cumplimiento de la palabra de Dios.
and that it was a sign of a prophecy being fulfilled.
Aún a esa edad que tenía,
Even at that age that I had,
mi confianza se depositaba más en Dios.
my trust was deposited more on God.
This is quite amazing. Let me ask you this.
Una pregunta, pastor.
Did you see people actually come to Christ through your ministry?
¿Viste tú personas, pastor, que vinieron a Cristo a través de tu ministerio?
Oh, claro que sí,
Yes, I did.
claro. Muchas personas,
Many people,
aún cuando yo vendía en el mercado,
even though in the marketplace where I would sell on the town square,
las mismas personas del mercado, las vendedoras,
the same people, the owners,
una vez a mí me reclutaron para el ejército.
one day in the middle of it, the army came and they snatched me away.
Y ellas llegaron al camión del ejército.
And I was put on a truck of the army.
Para-
Just a moment. We're going to have a little pause,
Vamos a pausar.
and then we're going to just have a little message, and then you're going to tell the story how you were snatched by the army.
Entonces vamos a regresar para contar esa historia
Ok.
de cómo te llevaron la Fuerza Armada.
You're watching the Carter Report, and our guest is Pastor Pacheco, who is the leader of the Adventist Church in El Salvador. Don't go away. We'll be back after this message. God has His time and His place for everything. And the time and the place now is Latin America, including Cuba. Time magazine talks about the Second Protestant Reformation and describes how hundreds of thousands, even millions of Latinos are coming to the gospel of Christ. I'm not an armchair theologian. I'm speaking according to experience. I've seen it with my own eyes. Recently, we went down to El Salvador. There I spoke in the largest football stadium in Central America, with the biggest crowd that football stadium had ever seen. They came not to see a football match, but to hear about the blood of Christ. Millions are coming to a knowledge of God in Latin America. Doors are opening in Cuba. Who knows? We may be going to Cuba soon. As the doors open, by the grace of God, we are going to step through those doors. And we want you to step through those doors with us and be part of our team for such a time as this. Please write to me, friend. Don't put it off. Write to me, John Carter, Post Office Box 1900, Thousand Oaks, California, 91358. In Australia, write to me at Terrigal, New South Wales. Be part of the Second Reformation. Join us and see the miracles of God. Amen. Welcome back to the Carter Report. My special guest today is a hero from El Salvador, Pastor Pacheco. And our great translator is Pastor Acosta, who is the senior pastor of the Spanish American Adventist Church in Los Angeles. Pastor Pacheco, you were brought up in El Salvador.
Tú creciste en El Salvador, pastor,
Sí.
In the midst of a civil war.
en medio de la guerra civil.
You saw people being killed all around you.
Viste mucha gente ser asesinada alrededor tuyo.
Some nights you had to go to the mountains.
Algunas noches tuviste que escaparte a las montañas.
Why did you flee to the mountains?
¿Por qué es que huías a las montañas?
Bueno, sencillamente porque no quería pertenecer a ninguno de los dos bandos,
Simply because I did not want to belong to either side that was fighting with each other.
porque era un hijo de Dios,
Because I was a son of God,
era un adventista del séptimo día
I was a Seventh-day Adventist,
y Dios tenía un propósito especial para mi vida.
and somehow I knew that God had a purpose for me.
And as a little boy, just listen to this, my friend, because this is sort of amazing. As a little boy of 10, you were out preaching in churches and giving Bible studies.
Así que como un niño de 10 años, tú andabas predicando y dando estudios bíblicos.
Sí, claro que sí. Y no solo hacía en el templo, lo hacía en el mismo cantón, donde trabajaba, a la escuela donde iba.
Not only in my local church, but in my neighborhood and at the marketplace where I used to work.
And so I understand you would go to the little shops in the marketplace and you would pray for the people who had their little businesses there.
Entiendo que tú orabas ahí en el mercado con los dueños de las personas que trabajaban.
And I've
ahí.
been told,
Y me han contado,
and you can confirm this
y
or
tú me lo
not,
puedes confirmar, sí o no,
that they called you the little pastor.
que te llamaban el pastorcito.
Así es.
And you were a Seventh-day Adventist Christian.
Y eras un adventista cristiano.
Así es.
And you saw people being killed all around
Y
you.
viste mucha gente ser asesinada alrededor tuyo.
And then one day,
Y un día
they came to steal you away.
vinieron a llevarte, a reclutarte, ¿correcto?
Tell us the story.
Cuéntanos esa historia.
Sí, pastor, cuando yo estaba en el mercado trabajando,
When I was working at the marketplace,
iba orando por los puestos de las personas.
and I was praying for each little shop,
La gente me llamaba para que les cantara y orara por ellos y les bendijera el negocio.
people would call me so that I can sing and pray and bless their shop.
Entonces ellos me llamaban nuestro pastorcito.
So they began to call me their little pastor.
Aha.
Entonces en ese tiempo que estábamos allí,
And at that moment, as I was doing my duty,
muchas veces el ejército llegaba a reclutar jóvenes
many times the government army would come and recruit young people
para el ejército.
for the army.
Just little boys.
Solamente jovencitos, niños.
Sí, jóvenes de 10,
Yeah.
11, 12, 14, 15
10,
años.
11, 12,
So
15
when they
years
came
old.
to get you, steal you away, how old were you then?
¿Cuántos años tenías tú en ese momento?
Tenía más o menos unos 14 años.
I was about 14
13,
years
14
of
años.
age.
Okay.
Sí. Y entonces me llevaron al camión
And I remember they snatched me, they took me to the bus,
a cortarme ya el cabello, a dejarme peloncito.
and they began to cut my hair, to bald me.
Oh.
Cuando llegaron estas damas del mercado,
When the shop owners, especially ladies, they came over to the truck, the government truck,
estaba el coronel allí
and the colonel was there.
con los soldados cuidándonos.
With the soldiers, they were protecting or covering them.
Me tomaron de los brazos, de las manos, las damas.
These ladies, they began to pull me from them,
Este es nuestro pastorcito, no lo pueden tocar.
and they said, "This is our little pastor. You cannot take him away."
Y ahí fue como Dios también me cuidó a través de esas personas que no eran de la iglesia.
And these ladies were not from the church, but God used them to protect me, to save my life.
Pero la manera como yo me había relacionado con ellos, orado, cantado,
And the way that I had related to them by singing and praying,
repartiéndoles el Centinela,
by giving them a Spanish magazine, they called it Herald, a Centinela magazine,
abriéndoles la Biblia,
opening the scriptures,
eso impresionó mucho a estas personas.
that impressed many of these ladies.
Y siempre me cuidaban.
And they were always protecting me.
So the ladies saved you.
Así que las damas te salvaron, pastor.
Sí, claro.
When they came to take you away and make you into one of their soldiers,
Cuando ellos vinieron a reclutarte y hacerte soldados de ellos,
do you remember what you were thinking?
¿tú te acuerdas qué estabas pensando?
Sí, claro que sí.
Yes, I do.
Yo decía en mis adentros
I was telling myself at that moment
que el Señor me iba a librar de esta situación,
that somehow I knew that God was going to save me from this situation.
porque sabía que Dios tenía un propósito para mi vida.
Because I knew that God had a purpose for my life.
No estar en el ejército ni en ningún cuartel,
Not to be in the army or with another faction,
sino estar en el ejército de Él, de Cristo Jesús.
but I knew that somehow I belonged to the Lord's army.
Were many young men and boys killed in this war?
En esta guerra, jovencitos fueron asesinados, pastor, murieron también.
Sí,
Niños.
claro que sí.
Yes.
So if you'd gone, quite likely you would have been killed.
Si te hubieran llevado, quizá te hubieran asesinado, hubieras
Sí,
muerto.
claro que sí. Porque muchas veces cuando reclutaban tanto de un bando como del otro,
Yes, because many times when they recruited from one faction or the other,
a veces venían enfrentamientos entre ellos,
there were moments where they would confront each other
balaceras,
and gunfights,
y en ese cruce de balas,
and between each other, the bullets,
muchos amigos míos del pueblo, del cantón,
many of my friends who were recruited,
perdían la vida.
they would lose their lives.
So the ladies came and protected you.
Así que las damas vinieron y te protegieron.
What did the colonel say?
¿Qué dijo el coronel?
No pudo contra ellas.
He could not stand against them.
He couldn't stand, the colonel couldn't stand against the ladies
He could not. No podía
because
en contra
God
de
was
él,
protecting you.
porque Dios te estaba protegiendo.
Así es.
Did you sense the presence of God on that occasion?
¿Sentiste la presencia de Dios, pastor, en ese momento?
Claro que sí. Yo nunca vi que ellas me defendieran o la gente del mercado.
You know, I didn't see how they were protecting me, but I saw something else.
Siempre vi que la mano de Dios se manifestaba en la vida de ellos.
I saw the presence of God in the middle of all this.
How did you see the presence of God
¿Cómo es que tú veías la presencia de Dios
in the midst of this terrible situation?
en medio de esta situación?
Bueno, en la intervención de ellas,
In their intervention,
a veces me avisaban antes cuando iban a reclutar.
somehow they knew and they would tell me because they tried to recruit me many other times.
Yo estaba tal vez en la casa.
Maybe I was at home.
So
Yo
many other times. This was not the only time.
So esta no fue la única ocasión que
Oh,
traté de
no,
reclutar.
muchas veces, muchas veces.
Many
Many
times.
times.
Sí, estaba en el colegio, en la escuela,
I was at school.
me mandaban una nota.
They would send me notes.
Cuídate, te van a reclutar este día, no salgas.
Be careful, don't come because they're going to recruit today.
Y entonces cuando iba para la iglesia,
When I would go to church,
ellos iban conmigo cuidándome,
they would travel and they would be my bodyguards and go with me to church.
y a veces tenía que correr porque ellas interferían en el reclutamiento.
And many times I had to run and they would hold them back, physically hold them back.
This is quite astounding.
Esto es una historia
So it didn't
tremenda.
happen once, it happened many
Así
times.
que no sucedió una vez, sucedió muchas veces.
Sí, muchas veces. Y no solo con el ejército del gobierno, sino que también con la guerrilla.
And not only with the army, the government army, but also with the guerrillas.
So you were caught up in a battle between the left and the right.
Así que te encontraron una lucha entre la derecha y la izquierda.
Correcto.
Now, we know today,
Hoy sabemos
and we think these statistics are probably accurate,
y que las estadísticas son
about
certeras.
75,000 people from El Salvador were murdered.
75,000 personas fueron asesinadas, pastor.
And you could have been one of those people who was killed.
Y tú pudieras haber sido una de esas personas que hubieran sido
Sí,
asesinadas.
claro que sí.
Did you, in your heart, on this occasion, believe that God had something great in mind for you?
En estos momentos, la intervención, ¿creías que Dios
Did
tenía
you,
algo para
did
ti?
you believe that God had a purpose for your life?
¿Creías que tenía un propósito para tu vida?
Claro que sí.
Yes, sir.
Claro que sí.
Why do you believe that God had a purpose for your life?
¿Por qué crees que Él tenía un propósito para tu vida?
Porque realmente Cuando vi muchas personas morir,
Because when I saw a lot of people dying,
cuando las mismas personas me avisaban,
when the same people would let me know ahead of time,
por ejemplo, una noche que reclutó la izquierda,
one night, for example, the guerrillas, they came and they recruited at nighttime.
llevaban cerca de 40 muchachos.
They had around 40 young kids.
40
with them.
kids.
40 kids.
Sí.
40.
And they were after you also.
Y también estaban detrás de ti.
Dentro de esos 40 iba yo.
I was walking amongst those 40 that were recruited already.
Ellos reclutaban en la noche.
They would recruit at night.
¿Sí? Y entonces nos iban a llevar de ese lugar donde vivíamos, que era Olomega,
And they would take us from this city to another one as we were traveling
a un lugar que se llama Tierra Blanca.
to a place called Tierra Blanca.
Ahí estaba esperando un helicóptero
There was a helicopter waiting there
para llevarnos a Cuba, a Nicaragua.
to take us to Nicaragua,
Después de Nicaragua a
goodness.
Cuba,
and from there to Cuba,
Goodness.
donde entrenaban a los jovencitos
To
where
Cuba.
they would train these children
para venir a combatir a El Salvador.
to come then and fight in El Salvador against the government forces.
Y justamente con otros 2, 3 muchachos que éramos adventistas,
And there were 2 other Adventists.
que
in the-
íbamos en el grupo,
as we were walking nearing the helicopter,
oramos
we were praying,
y dijimos, no nos vamos a subir a ese bote.
and we told ourselves we are not going to jump on that helicopter.
Porque nos dijeron, si nos subiéramos al bote, si no nos subimos, nos iban a matar.
They said, if you don't go on it, we're going to kill you.
Y en ese momento que íbamos a decidir a no subirnos al bote,
And as we had decided then not to jump on this,
viene el ejército
the army then comes.
y entonces se encuentra con la guerrilla
And so here the 2 factions are now facing each other.
y comienza la balacera.
And now the gunfight begins.
Y nosotros los 40 tirándonos en el suelo,
And the 40 kids, we all just dropped to the floor.
nosotros pidiéndole a Dios.
And we were praying to God.
Muchos de los 40, unos 10, 12 murieron.
Around 10 or 12 of them got killed.
Pero los adventistas que estábamos ahí,
But those Adventists, the ones we were praying,
Dios nos cuidó de una manera especial.
one way or another, the Lord protected us in a very
Y
special
ahora
way.
estoy aquí por gracia del
And
Señor.
I'm here by God's grace.
So we believe that God had his hand over you.
Creemos que Dios tenía la mano de él sobre ti.
Así es.
And God had in mind something great for you.
Y tenía en mente algo grande para ti.
And we saw that when we went to El Salvador.
Y vimos eso cuando fuimos a El Salvador contigo.
Amén.
My friends, you're watching the Carter Report. Our guest today is Pastor Pacheco, a man who has been called by God and preserved by God. And we've been listening also to Pastor Acosta. Please write to me, John Carter, Post Office Box 1900, Thousand Oaks, California, 91358 in Australia. Write to me at Terrigal. The story today tells us that God is alive and God has a plan for your life. He cares for you. Until next time, God bless you.